Masterminds have been around for a long time, right? But unless you had a bunch of extra income to throw at it, you couldn't be a part of it. Well, we wanted to solve that problem. And so we're bringing masterminds to you for free. Welcome to Mastermind for the Masses.
And welcome to this week's Mastermind for the Masses. We've got Shan and Colby here like always, but I'm also super excited. We've got Chad Jones, and Chad Jones and I go way back. We actually went to high school together, so he knows all my dark secrets from way back then. But super excited to have you on the show today, Chad. You want to give us a little bit of background of kind of what you're doing nowadays, and just like fill us in for for our listeners that may not know, I mean, gosh, high school would have been 20 plus years ago for us now. What, give us a little walkthrough of where you've wound up.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do that. Yeah. Like you said, Josh, we go way back, as far as, algebra class, where we're sitting in class goofing off and, that sort of thing. So, we go way back. I started, drafting I'm an architect right now, and I started that journey way back in high school and drafting Mr. Brooks' class, which I also had with you. Took 4 years of drafting. Went on to Washington University in St. Louis, where I got my Bachelor of Science in Architecture. Went from there, started interning with Harvard Jolly Architecture firm that at the time I was based out of St. Pete. Went from there, got my master's at the University of Miami, went back to Harvard Jolly, transferred offices within the company, and ended up in Orlando. And now I'm here. I've risen to the rank of the director of the Orlando office here in Orlando. And we specialize in education projects, that's K-12. Higher education, we do some public safety. Firm-wide, we also do other municipal work as well. So, but my passion is education. That's something that's kind of transitioned into. Besides my day job of being an architect, I also do some teaching and mentoring on the side. I'm a professor in the City Lab program for the University of Florida, their graduate school program here in Orlando. So that's something that I've been doing past couple of years. Lots of mentoring, and trying to stay involved as much as I can. I'm married, got 2 little boys, 8 and 6, and so beyond the work thing, I also full-time dad, and that keeps me busy, and that's why you see all the gray hair.
No, that's awesome, man. And we're gonna dive into kind of making your dreams into reality, because you did know early on that was something you wanted to pursue. Because I only took that 1 year of drafting with you,
Right.
and then I went off and did all sorts of business stuff. Actually, is kind of where my passion led, and that's where I'm at today. So, and funny enough, when you talk about the K-12, right, that's actually where Shan and I met the first time. We both worked in the K-12 environment for a number of years, and that's how we kind of got connected. But before we dive into all that, I do always like to ask the guys what's going on this week for them. So, Shan, what's up with you this week, man?
It's been a pretty light week. Been tackling a couple new projects for work. Other than that, it's the first week of summer for me with the kids. So that's going to be kind of a change up in my day-to-day for sure. A little bit more attention needed there. But other than that, it's a pretty light week.
Yeah, you guys still have the young kids. Mine are almost off into college now, so I started a little bit before you all. So
you still have the same problems, right?
Yeah, they don't go away. That's for sure. Oh man, Colby, how about you, man? What's going on?
Nothing crazy with me. Probably the only new thing that I'm doing is I've been doing more like yogic strength exercises almost, just for our hockey conditioning, and holy cow are those kicking my ass right now. So outside of my lower body being extremely sore, I'm doing good.
Nice. And personally, I am actually helping coach a Dale Carnegie training session this week. So because of that, my camera's a little weird. I'm actually sitting in my car filming, but we're dedicated to this pod. We're going to make it happen. So,
awesome.
Perfect. So we'll circle into this, Chad. I just want to get your initial thoughts, man, because I do know, like, I feel like you kind of had a path in mind back in high school, and I was definitely probably on the opposite spectrum with no real path and clarity. We were joking before we came on even about how you signed my yearbook. I won't put you on the spot for that, but basically just encouraging me to get my act together and figure out what I was going to do in life, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
It all worked out for the good, but I guess when you were at that moment in your life, right, and where you are now, and thinking back, what advice or what kind of steps do you think are critical when you're making that journey? It's something I'm super interested right now with my kids headed off to college too.
Right.
It's like, how do I set them up to make their dreams reality like you've done, man?
That's I mean that's a loaded question. There's a lot of
Yes.
factors into that, and so part of the reason why obviously I was joking when I wrote that in the yearbook, but
Yeah.
from my perspective, I saw that you had so much talent and you had so much to offer, and so that was just my way of poking you and saying, hey man, let's go ahead and realize that potential, because I thought there was a lot there, and obviously you've done a lot with it. For myself, uh, again, if you talk to my family, they'll tell you how super stubborn I am. So I get an idea in my mind, and I have to do what I need to do to make it a reality. And I'll joke a little bit on myself with my grandmother. I was raised by my grandmother, as you remember, Josh, and
Hmm.
it was her rule that at 18 you had to get a job, you had to go to college, but you had to be out. So there wasn't much of a choice. There wasn't much of a choice. So and all joking aside, that was the motivation that, hey, I got to do something with the gifts that I have, and I was very fortunate to have identified the fact that architecture could be a path for me early on. In previous talks that I've done, stated that in 8th grade, what happened was, and you may or may not remember, they used to give out these career assessment things. There, they would basically ask you a bunch of questions of like what you might be interested in, and at the end it tells you like several careers that might be of interest to you. And obviously, the first one that popped up for me was architecture. And I was, oh, that makes sense. And I like to draw and build things. And then I started taking the drafting class with Mr. Brooks, and I took it all 4 years. And the year that I had with you, and something I really liked, and I thought I was pretty good at. And so that kind of confirmed it. And it hasn't been an easy road, obviously, as you do school and you start in the profession, and architecture is a hard profession, and it's one of we joke in school, or the classmates joke that we are one of the hardest workers in college because we're constantly at the architecture school working late night and different things. So it's not an easy thing to kind of break into, but like I said, I was too stubborn to do something else. So and it works. It fits my personality.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, hope that
No, that
answered
makes perfect sense, man. I think, it does. It does. I think all of us probably would agree that a little bit of stubbornness, even though it can sometimes, I guess it's a mature stubbornness, right? Because
Mhm.
immature stubbornness, not ideal. But when you can
Right,
turn that stubbornness into an asset, it's
right,
super valuable.
right,
I think they call that more commitment at that point.
right. Commitment. That's good. That's a better word for it. And like I said, I was
Yeah.
fortunate to have discovered something that I liked and I was passionate about early on. A lot of people don't have that same fortune. And so it wasn't just stubborn for the sake of being stubborn. It's something that I knew that I was wanted to do, and I was could be pretty good at it. So that made all the sense in the world to stick with it. Now, if it was something else, like my wife's a lawyer, there's no way there's not enough stubbornness in the world that could have kept me in the law profession, as boring as it is. So, but she loves it. So, but that's just something that wouldn't have worked for me. So I'm glad I didn't have a
Yeah.
vision or did get one of those assessments that said I would have been a lawyer. So
Yeah, no, the passion and the commitment for sure is key, and I think consistency comes along with that too.
mhm.
So Colby, I'm just curious, man, when you think about how consistency can play into that long-term success, where do you see the importance of that? Because, you know, again, there's a little bit of that stubbornness side of things that keep us going, but to Chad's point, you got to have the passion to keep going back to it and putting up with it over and over again, those little setbacks and everything. So how do you see that all coming together?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going to ask Chad about, actually, because I was really curious when you say you found yourself being very passionate, about architecture and the work that you were doing to learn it and grow your skill set within it, pretty early on in your life. When you say you're passionate, like, what does passion mean to you? Because I feel like part of the problem is that, especially for a lot of younger folks, is they hear people say that they're passionate about things, but they don't really, like, at least for me, I found myself not really understanding what that actually meant. Like, does it mean, like, to me, I almost thought it meant that nothing ever felt difficult, that it was all like sunshine and rainbows, that you loved every minute of it, etc. Whereas as I've gotten older and as I've kind of seen myself be committed to stuff, there's been plenty of moments where I have hated what I've done, or like I've just been very unhappy. Like I hit these very hard roadblocks, and I do have to push through them still. And the things that have propelled me through them is more so wanting to be excellent at a craft, and not necessarily, like, there is an element of actually loving like elements of the craft itself and like what initially draws to you. But I've always found that there's still things that I dislike about it as well. And so it's always about, like, I guess finding the things that make you want to push forward. So I'm really curious as to what that was for you, or if it was just like a very like happy marriage, so to speak, where there weren't any conflicts, so to speak, with your relationship, learning architecture growing up.
Right. I mean, that's a great point. And to be perfectly honest with you, Colby, I actually look at it the opposite, not the sunshine and roses. I actually think that if there is a passion, it's going to help you get through the difficult parts. Just like if you look at it from the marriage perspective, marriages are great when things are good. The level of commitment that you show when things are bad is to show that true love and that true commitment. And so I look at it similar to the profession. When things are hard, when things are difficult, can you get through that stage? So back to what Josh was talking about with the commitment piece of it, that's part of it, right? It's also putting yourself in position to say, hey, there's this might be difficult at this time, or for example, I'm learning a new skill set, or there's something that is difficult and it makes me uncomfortable at this point, but there's an end goal in mind. And it's always trying to keep that end goal and that end target in mind. And I think that's part of it too. It's not just, because the day-to-day is a grind. There's days we're working on a project, we're trying to complete construction documents. That's a grind. That doesn't feel great in the moment, but that carrot is that when we're finished, we're going to have a building that we're going to be able to point to and say, hey, we designed, we created that, and that made an impact for somebody. And so it's that final carrot, that final destination that you're looking for, that helps kind of keep you going. Now, let's not get it wrong and twisted or anything. If you won the lottery, if I won the lottery, I wouldn't be an architect tomorrow. So I'm not one of those people that say, hey, I never worked a day in my life, because no, it's work. It's hard work, man. And the fact that you have to get up and you have to answer to somebody every day, and whether that's your bosses, whether that's the public, whether that's whoever, there's someone that you have to answer. The fact that you have to do that is difficult. So at the end of the day, it might as well be something that you can take some sort of satisfaction with doing, and that's something I found, especially doing the type of architecture I do, the education piece of it. I took some satisfaction to that end product. And we're working on projects that take, from start to finish, it might take 3, 4, 5 years. And so, especially in construction where it gets tough, we're having to make quick hard decisions on things that you might have to compromise a little bit. Those types of things get difficult in the moment, but again, it's always trying to, okay, by the time, when we finish, we're going to have an amazing building that students are going to come in and enjoy, and that's kind of the bottom line. So kind of taking a step back and looking at that at frankly any profession. I think if I were to give advice to someone who's coming up and trying to figure out what they're going to do, that would be it. Hey, keep that end goal in mind, and it might be good. Sometimes it's not going to be good all the time, but do you still have that commitment even when it's not great, to keep going with it?
Dude, I love that transparency so much. It's not, because we do hear it a lot, right? You never work a day in your life. That is kind of nonsense at the end of it, right? Everybody wins the lotto. There might be things that people still do to occupy their time,
right?
But also with that kind of luxury, right? If you get bored with it, you just move on to the next thing that you want to do.
Absolutely. Right.
Yeah. Whereas you don't get that luxury in your day job most of the time because you got bills, responsibilities, and everything else. So Shan, circling around to you, man, that grind, I know you face it, and I know you push through it because of your passions, right? Like you're obviously, you got your day job, you've got your couple of businesses as well. And those, if you weren't passionate about wanting to continue to keep that going, that grind it would probably bring it to a halt, but it doesn't. So like for you, what is it that keeps you pushing through and getting that consistency and making sure that you're always making progress?
Yeah. I mean, there are times where definitely there's bumps in the road for sure. Even when you're passionate about something, you're not always 100% motivated, and that drive can really run into a few roadblocks. So I think that's why it's the question kind of answers itself a little bit. I think it's important from what Chad was mentioning earlier. Once you can identify at least a sense of passion for something that you're doing, it makes it a lot harder to give up on, especially if you're receiving the outcome of why you're passionate about it. So for me, for instance, and I think working with you and Colby, Josh, you guys can easily tell that my passion is broad, but it is clearly providing value. If I can do something for someone and get a specific positive outcome out of them, it just does something to me. I feel like a lot of people have that same experience, and it might be for what they do specifically. But for me, the reason I delving in businesses is being able to provide a customer with something that they can purchase and actually receive value on. They can provide feedback, or I'm driven and I'm passionately moving forward off of someone's positive experience from what I was able to help or do. Same thing with being a software engineer. Honestly, I don't think my passions in coding and my passions in app development, but what it really comes down to for my career is building something that either didn't exist before or didn't operate as high of value previously, and then now it does. And just seeing that that entire process, or that entire feedback given post production, is just what drives me 100% of the way. And I think that's kind of the question in a nutshell, or the answer in a nutshell, is what drives me is getting that result of providing value. And if you just stop, or at least you just kind of give up, that leaves a whole nother avenue of losing that outcome, right? If I were just to quit my business one day, I would no longer get positive reviews on a product, or emails back from a customer saying, man, I just got this in and I love it. And I'd lose that sense of passion for it. So it's a little bit easier for me, but it goes back to Chad's point. If you can identify it early, or at least get a sense of what passionately drives you, I think the rest becomes easy.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? That because everyone here has talked about almost a little bit adding value or giving back more, and kind of that end goal with even like a little bit of altruism, right? Being able to contribute something that's bigger than themselves. I mean, you just talked about it by creating, the value on those things. Chad was mentioning about it with like not only designing those buildings and seeing that at the end, and what that allows those children to do, but also in his mentorship, right? Like you guys are driven a lot by adding value beyond yourself and giving back. I mean, how important do you see that aligning with passion, right? So you obviously want to be doing something that you're good at, and you enjoy, because otherwise it really will be like every day is going to be miserable. But it sounds to me like you guys have a little bit more of a driving force than just, well, I like this thing. You're doing more, like you're creating something, right? And so where do you see that fitting in for people? Because I always look at this like, if younger people were tuning into the podcast right now, or even people looking for that second act,
Right.
how do you really make sure that the thing you're going to lock into, especially in the second act, might be even more scary, right? Because you're locking in probably. So if you're going to make a change or make a switch like that, how do you know it's the right thing, right?
That's a great point, Josh. And I don't think you do. If you're trying to go into a second act, or even just pick a career, it's scary, and especially considering that you're going to be doing this for a long time, whatever that is. So I think there's a couple of things with that, and one I probably should have mentioned earlier. I don't know if you all have kids, but it sounds like you do, or some.
I think Colby does not, but Shan and I do.
Okay, so that's part of it too. One of the things that I grew up in a certain background, and had, I wouldn't say disadvantages, but I had certain parameters that were placed on me as I was growing up. And part of working as hard as I do, regardless of what profession or path that I took, it is all in preparation to make sure that my kids are able to have a different lifestyle than what I had growing up. So that's fundamental to it, right? Another thing with that is I've been blessed and fortunate to have people along the way that have helped me, have mentored me, that have put me in the right positions to help me to get to the position I'm in. And I feel an obligation to help pass that along, like to be able to tell my story, so that to inspire somebody who may or may not have had those same opportunities, and allow them to see that this is you're not limited by where you're from, and so on and so forth, and allow that to help propel them, push them forward. I feel like that's the obligation on my end. So regardless of, again, what profession I'm doing, that's at the heart of, and that's why I do a lot of the mentoring and the teaching and everything is for that reason, is that I at my core, even if I was a lawyer or a pharmacist or whatever, I feel like I have a responsibility to do that as well. So if that answers your question, Josh.
No, I think it does. It's almost like a sense of duty, right?
Right.
And I can definitely relate with that. And I had to do something similar. I'm actually in the construction field now as well, and I left the K-12 environment to move into that, and it did take me a little bit at the beginning to figure out how does that tie into what I'm doing. And ultimately I settled very similar to what you were talking about there, where we're building homes, we're building houses that people turn into homes, right? And this is, I mean, that is something, right? It's you think about that, and it is really rewarding, because those homes are what make that safe environment for people to grow up and do the thing that makes them passionate and give back. So it's really kind of a bit of a legacy in a way, but you can feel good about being a small portion of it, which keeps me going.
And to follow that up on that point, you can really make any profession that you want. What I tell people within the office coming up, that you make it what you want it to be. Regardless of what profession it is, whether it's architecture or construction or whatever, make it what you want it to be. Whether if you want to help at the core, if you want to help people, and you have a skill set of doing construction, then turn that into what you want it to be. And whether that's doing a podcast, whether that's mentoring, whether that's doing whatever, make it worth because that's where it's gonna, you put yourself in a position where you don't feel like you're going to work every day. But that's the thing I like about what I do is my day's always different. It could be I'm talking to clients. It could be I'm in a construction site. It could be that
you get invited to be on a podcast.
So, but in a way, it's all still going back towards like, okay, this is at the core. It's going back to those core principles and the things that I feel like I need to do as an individual, not as a architect. And so I made the field of architecture work towards that end, if that makes sense.
No, it doesn't. I think you touched on something there that I am curious to get everyone's thoughts on here is like, a lot of times I think we look at separating work and life, and we talk about that work-life balance and everything, but you hit on it. You're a whole person. You're a whole human all the time, right? So like, even when you go into work, that might be your focus at the moment, but holistically, you've got a bigger objective in your head, and everything you're doing adds to that, right? You might have to focus on the work part at this moment or the family part at that moment or whatever, but it's not really a balancing act. It's all you, right? You want to make sure you keep those things in check, so that not one thing takes over and you lose that, but that whole you needs that fulfillment, I guess, in the long run to really to feel good about everything that you're contributing and doing.
Right.
And we see that, I think about Colby and Shan, right? Colby picked up hockey because he was balancing himself out there for his whole self. Shan's back into jiu-jitsu, and they make me feel bad about myself because I sit around and do nothing, and they're out there getting physical. But one of these days it might inspire me. So I mean, where do you see all that fitting in, Shan? Like the whole picture, right? Because you're balancing a good amount of things on any given week. And I know you've got some tools in place, like that placemat and things like that we've talked about prior. But how do you ensure to keep that balance across the board?
Yeah, no, I honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with I don't know, ultimately just your mindset, really. It can be tough to balance like anything that's extracurricular on top of whether you like own a business or your career or anything of that matter. But like when your mentality is on like constant improvement or at least like consistent growth, I think it helps a lot. And that's why it's important to me, like for jiu-jitsu, for example. When things start to stagnate, things get a little bit slower and my free time starts to grow. I look at it as like opportunities to really like dedicate that time to something that would provide myself some sort of like higher level of value, right? Like that's honestly why I go to jiu-jitsu. I don't go to jiu-jitsu because I enjoy it. Because to be honest with you, sometimes it's pretty tough to enjoy. It's pretty brutal. But at the end of the day, like every single time I finish the session, I'm really happy that I went. And that like when I look at it in the terms of like, okay, why am I doing this? It's literally that self-value, right? Like my mindset's always, even if it has to do with just for me personally, like I like to provide value for other people, but I also like to know that I'm developing value for myself, like consistently. And I think that it's funny that goes hand in hand because it's really only whenever like my free time starts to grow and my like anything I'm doing extra starts to fizzle out and it just becomes like equilibrium. That's when I feel that urge or that like sensation of learning something new or doing something extra. So I think, I don't know, I play mind tricks on myself to make myself passionate because I feel like I'm obtaining new value by doing it. But that's just my perspective on like how to keep it important and how to like make time for it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking through, right? Obviously, Chad and I are both like 25, and Shan, you're like 24. But Colby's the young one here. So out of the group, just crossing that 21-year-old mark. No, obviously we got a few more years than that. But Colby, you are the younger one on the call here. Does this resonate with you? Because I feel like we have a little bit of a benefit of being able to look backwards a little farther and see, some of those impacts. When you talk about legacy, the longer you're around, obviously, the more you can see what you've done. How about coming from a little less years, right? Like, is that on the forefront of your mind, or I guess I'm just trying to make
Yeah,
sure we
it's
cover the
definitely
gambit.
yeah, it's definitely a bit different, I would say for sure. I think it resonates with me in the sense that I know at some point I'll get to that point in my life where that's more at the forefront of my thinking. Um, but kind of before I get into that a little bit more, I did want to touch on something you guys were bringing up about kind of selflessness and giving back, and how that can be a real positive driving force in what you're doing in life. And I definitely think that that can be a very big thing for someone in their life, and maybe it's big during a certain moment and it's less so later, depending on what's going on. But I just wanted to actually like share my perspective on it, because actually, maybe this sounds bad, but it's actually not selflessness that really drives my motivation in the things that I do. And it's just because I've recognized something about myself, and it's that I'm obsessed with mastery over anything, essentially. Like, I love watching someone who's like at the top of their craft, and think about like all the things that go into perfecting it. And even for myself, anything that I do, I always like put my heart and soul into it, because that's what really engages me mentally, physically, etc., is just trying to figure out anything that I can do to be better at this one thing. And the process of that just has always been super engaging to me. And so I've just kind of latched onto that in my own life, and recognize that like there's no point fighting it. Just give into it, essentially, and let that fuel what you do. And I think that's an important thing for people to kind of consider, is that people are different, and people will be motivated by different things, especially at different points in their life. And so I don't want people to think that there's like a one size fits all,
Right.
motivation solution, right? It really depends on who you are as a person. But to that point of like legacy and everything, yeah, no, it's definitely not at the forefront of my mind. I think for me, it's just, I view my life as like an ecosystem, so to speak. Like, work and not work are two separate things, so to speak, but they do inhabit the same body, essentially. And so, if work is super toxic and almost poisonous, you could say, right, it will leak into your personal life. It will, you know, be detrimental in some ways to anything outside of it. And so I do, as much as like we talk about separating the two and making sure that you have time to yourself and time outside of work, etc., you know, they still need to be almost like symbiotic in their relationship almost. And so I definitely like keep that in mind. And I definitely don't want to be in a situation where, like me personally, I don't want to be in a situation where work is taking too much out of my life for me to enjoy it. Because, my goals in life are to, have a fun, engaging, and fulfilling life, and what that is for me may be different for someone else. But that does involve, a healthy amount of free time to, enjoy hockey, enjoy hiking, enjoy spending time with my fiance and all that sort of stuff. And, I think it's kind of like you need a vision for what you want your life to look like. I think essentially when it boils down to it, when we're talking about pursuing a dream, because, I think, Chad, I'd be curious your thoughts. You have to know what you're willing to sacrifice when you're making this journey of what you're going to go after. And if you don't have a bigger picture of what at least a vague idea of what you'd like to have, you may not sacrifice enough, or you may sacrifice too much, and you may end up regretting that later on. So that's at least kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of great points, Colby. A lot to unpack and address there. Primarily being that, yeah, that goalpost changes a lot, right? And so when I was in my late 20s, that what my idea of success or drive or whatever is different than what it is now. Just different life experiences that changes, it grows. Different factors come into play. So that goalpost changes. And so to your point, when I was in my late 20s, that motivation, or the things that I thought was motivating myself and pushing me in the direction of, hey, this is what you want to do, was different. So I'm going to use a specific example. At that time, I was working on getting my license to be an architect, and there was just a 2-year, because it's at the time it was 7 tests. It's now 6 tests, but they take a long time to do. So at that time, that was that was it. That was that sacrifice that you're talking about, Colby. That okay, well, I don't want to get in long-term relationships. I don't want to. I can't do a lot of traveling. I can't do a lot of this and this and this, because that was the singular focus, almost to like I said, almost to a detriment. But it was because I had that one singular goal in mind. Now, since I've been past that and have progressed in my career, that kind of mentality has changed. That hey, that isn't necessary all the time. You can do. There's different tactics to doing that, but like I said, it's just a form of kind of progressing and maturing. To address the point about the perfecting the craft, and I'm glad you mentioned that. But I think that's commendable, and in a way, in the process of you doing that, you're creating a legacy without even knowing it. I don't want to go pop culture, but since it's relevant, I mean, I'm thinking back to the Kendrick Lamar Drake beef, and this is in the back and forth, and I had again, just because of lifestyle and everything, I just hadn't been into hip hop like that in a long time, but that kind of caught my attention, mainly for the reason that I look at Kendrick and the way that he crafted that whole thing, and I'm looking at an artist like at the top of his craft, right? And so in a way that is even inspiring. It's like, hey, you got this master artist who's perfected what he's doing, and I think that's inspirational in itself. And whether that's hip hop, whether it's architecture, whether that's whatever you're doing, I think there's something to that, and can truly be inspirational as well.
I'm glad you're on the Kendrick and.
There's no. I
was like, oh no, he's like, hopefully he's not on the Drake end, because
right. Right. So.
It's interesting you guys talk about sacrifices and what you're willing to sacrifice, because it got me thinking, right? What have I been willing to sacrifice over the years? And for me, I think it was the pace of my accomplishments, so it's not always sacrificing necessarily something. It might just be how quickly you get from point A to point B, because
right.
There were many things I wasn't willing to give up. And that I struggled with that for a little bit, because we put this whole timeline on stuff, which
right.
is good, but you also got to give yourself a little bit of grace. I'm not a huge fan of firm deadlines, because sometimes they're important, sometimes they're necessary, but as long as you're making progress, I think you're hitting that successful mark.
Yeah, that's a good point, Josh. I think sorry to interrupt you, but want to address that, like the sometimes, and this is something that I've grown, as I've matured in my mentality, is that, to your point, like we put these like self-imposed deadlines or restrictions on ourselves for whatever reason, and a lot of it tends to be outside sources as opposed to what we feel internally. So I think constant evaluation about, okay, what is the real purpose of this? Like, what am I trying to satisfy something that I set as a personal goal, or is it I'm being influenced from outside voices? And so I think that's a very good point. And if we all take a step back and understand, like, what is the real purpose of this, I think we could be a lot happier in what we do day to day.
Yeah, and it sounds like, and that kind of echoes what Colby was saying, right? He knows himself, he knows what drives him, and it's different than some other folks. Even though he's accomplishing the same things, there is no one size fits all, and that's one thing.
Right.
that's the beauty of what this podcast is with the Mastermind for the Masses, because we get the different perspectives, you get the different life experience, you get the different everything, right? And it really does open your mind up to saying, okay, I can take these bits and pieces.
Yeah.
What Chad said resonated with me, but I agreed with Colby on that piece, and I liked what Shan said there. I'm going to take that and put it together and effectively build my legacy
Right.
of what it's going to look like, and I think as long as people are open to having these conversations and taking that time to reflect, they're ultimately going to find themselves being able to have that success, whatever that is to them, and continue to have those achievements along the way.
Right.
Like we were joking before we got on today and actually hit record, but Chad and I used to have some crazy ambitions, some wild things, and inventions that you probably only see in some sci-fi movies. and now we refined it a little bit. Not that we've ever, Chad's still out there designing, so he's still creating things, just maybe more practical things. And same with me, right? I'm still taking a lot of those applications and business ideas that, we would chat about back then, and I'm putting them into kind of a real world practice. So we didn't ever lose those passions. We just found a way to make them fit in with our reality. So no, that's awesome, man. I think this has been an awesome conversation. I think if I was looking, I'm not, but if I was looking to kind of switch up careers, this gives me a lot of advice in, just thinking through what is it I'm trying to get, what am I hoping to do, and how can I set myself up for the most success for that. But I want to give everyone an opportunity here to kind of wrap up with any final thoughts, cover anything that maybe we didn't quite hit on or want to circle back to. So Colby, I'm going to throw it to you, man. You want to wrap us up with any final thoughts for today?
Yeah, sure. I'll wrap up with just kind of quick anecdote because I actually recently, you could say, made that sort of career trajectory change. I got out of college, I did a certain sort of career path for a couple years, and got to a point where I just really wasn't happy with where I was at and where it was heading, and needed to make a change. And I think part of the problem when you're making that change is you may have no freaking clue what the heck you're going to change into. You just know you need one. And I think that's a point in your time where you need to be very vulnerable and very open and communicative with your loved ones, your friends, and start bouncing some ideas off them. Because if it wasn't for my brother, I don't think that I would have found my current path in tech, because he's the one that actually really motivated me and encouraged me and believed in me to be able to do the sorts of things that I'm doing now. And I had no sort of belief in myself at the time to be able to do something like that. And sometimes you do really need people outside of yourself to help you out, and there's no shame in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, definitely peer groups and networks. And just family and friends, right? That there is so much power in that. So I appreciate you saying that. Shan, what about you, sir? You got some final thoughts for us this week around this topic?
Yeah, I think out of today's episode, what really resonated with me is when Colby asked Chad, and I totally get his perspective and why he asked this too. He asked, how do you identify, or how do you know at an early stage what you're passionate about? And from Colby's perspective, I think he's thinking about how most people think. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm just kind of constantly struggling. And I think Chad gave a perfect answer. He says, you don't. So in that sense of, like, you might not know what you're passionate about, I think it's important to be able to commit to something. Maybe not full in, but give it, at least your 90% effort. And this goes back to what Colby's point was just now, like being able to identify or trust yourself that you're going to be able to say, I need to make a change. This isn't it. Like, this isn't what I'm truly passionate about. I liked it at first, but it's not long-term for me. I think that can go so much further than just saying, oh, I'm not into this. I'm not super passionate about it. I'm not even going to do it. Because I think in the mindset of most people who are young, they're like, I need to find that one thing that it's just going to click in my mind like overnight, and I'm going to double down on it and do that for like the rest of my life. And I just don't think that's realistic.
Right.
I think that again, like that's what really resonated with me. What Chad said, you really don't. I think passion is something you build. I don't think it's something you discover like right off of like, you know, overnight. So yeah, anyway, for me, that's what really resonated with me on this episode. And I think I'm going to start thinking about that more and more as I really try to unlock those passions, because that's something that that I really like to do. Is I like to discover new things and try to find what that key like specific passion is for me. And it goes back to just it not being something you discover overnight. It's something you build.
Man, that was a truth bomb right there, right? Passion is something that you build, not something
Right.
you discover. I love that, man. What about you, Chad? What do you got for us wrapping things up today?
Yeah, I appreciate you guys giving me an opportunity to come in and sit and chat with you. And I don't have a lot of public conversations like this, so it's great and refreshing to know that people are out there like-minded and willing to talk about these things. I'm going to contradict myself a little bit from the things that I talked about earlier, and I was saying how stubborn I was and you know, had an idea of what I was wanting to do and so on and so forth. I think one of the keys is just having an open mind and be willing to learn and willing to pivot. To Colby's point, even now, I would say that doing architecture, obviously it's all architecture, but doing design is like a small part of what I do now. Like I think one of the biggest parts of my job description is doing business development. And if you would have asked me in high school that, hey, this is part of what you're going to be doing in 20 years, I was like, you're crazy. I was, you know me, Josh, you knew me at the time. I was a major introvert, right? So that for that to be like a core of what, you know, makes us successful now is mind blowing, right? So again, I'm still an introvert. So it's you know, these types of things tend to be a little bit more difficult than some people are natural at it, but it's part of understanding that's part of what, you know, architect eventually, you know, goes. So I had to have an open mind, like, hey, you know, it's something I need to learn and work on and progress and just add to the skill set. So just having going back to having an open mind and be willing to learn and grow and talk to people. That's it. So thank you again.
Yeah, no, it's been great having you on, man. And you know, one of the things you said earlier totally resonated with me too, that the goalposts move throughout your life, right? They shift. So I guess my final thought for today would be, you know, trust your gut. I think we have a tendency to almost overthink some of these decisions sometimes. And don't get me wrong, you should do your due diligence. You should put in your thoughts to it. But at a certain point, you don't want to get caught up in that analysis paralysis either, and not be brave enough and confident enough in your own skills and abilities to take that step when you know it's time. You know, Colby was talking about he didn't know exactly where he needed to go, but he knew he needed to go and have a change. And I think that's something to definitely acknowledge, is that he trusted himself enough to recognize that a change was needed and then figure out that change as he went. So, and I think it's important, because if those goalposts are changing, you've got to have that confidence in order to continue to achieve that success through life and build that legacy we were talking about. So, no, this has been a fantastic conversation. Chad, thanks again, man, for being on here. Every one of our listeners, please let us know what you thought. Share in the comments, share this pod with everyone you know, and if there's a place for 5 stars, go ahead and throw that out there too, whatever you're feeling. But yeah, definitely great conversation again. And thank you, Chad. And we will see everyone else next time on Mastermind for the Masses. Thank you.